Hi everyone. So we've got lots of little snippets and help videos, as you've seen, to do with the compliance and onboarding section. But this one, the idea of this is really to put it all together so you can really understand how Adapt does checks with the candidate when you're submitting them for a job. So really we're looking at, is the candidate compliant for that job? So what I'd like to do is to just take you through the journey of how it works slowly. So even though we've seen how to add compliance to a client record, how to add it to the candidate record, what I want to do is do that again and make it all come together and how the stops are put into place. So what we're going to start off looking at is the client record. So let's say you're in the Adapt system, you've started working with compliance and you're just starting it all off. So you can go against the company, go to their particular compliance and onboarding page, and you can then add in the items that that client has said it's essential for candidates to have to work for them. So I might say standard ones for this client are right to work, criminal conviction, and then we could also say an ID check and a site safety, for example. So they're the standard things. So what happens is now, because I've added them at client level, if I go and add a job into the system, so let's go and add on a new temp regular job. So I've added in all my mandatory fields and my pay in there and my start times and end times. And then I'm going to confirm that job into the system. So here we go, we've got our temp regular job. So if we now go to the compliance and onboarding page, you'll see that those 4 particular items are there. So what you've really got to think about with each of your clients is, what compliance do they need? Is it different per client? Or there'll be some clients where you think, well, actually, it's different per role. So you can decide to either add it at the client level anyway and go to each job and remove and add things on as appropriate, or you can not add it to the client at all and just add it to the jobs that need compliance against them. So you're going to have to really think about how it's going to work for you guys with each of those clients. So I'm going to say they're the 4 standard things. I know I need to get those particular things for this client, but actually for this particular role, they've also said they do need a forklift license as well. So as you can see, next to the job now, I can go and add additional items in here. So I'm going to go and add that in if I go and find it. So we've got in there a forklift license, particular item in there. So I'm going to confirm that. And they've said that is definitely a requirement for this role, which makes sense. In addition, like I've said before, what you could do is you could go on there for particular jobs and you could remove items if you do need to. So then as you're meeting candidates, or you may have candidates already in the system that have compliance against them, but you're going to be going to people, to the candidate, and as you're adding new candidates on, you're going to be going to their compliance and onboarding page, and you're going to be adding items against them or packages. You might be creating packages for clients or for general. So if I go to add item or assign items and click on find, again, as an agency, we might say, well, we're always checking this and this and this. They could be like your standard things that you're checking. So you can see there next to Tom's record, he's got right to work, criminal record, and ID checks. And at the moment, because they've just been added on, their status is incomplete in the system. So this is saying we know we need that requirement, but no one's come in yet and ticked off that you've actually received those documentation. So as you get the documents in from Tom, don't forget to go and attach them into the document library. So they're sitting in there before you come in here and start ticking off each item. So you're going to be going in there, ticking next to each one individually and going to update item. So changing that status to complete is you confirming you have received it. And you can put an expiry date in if you need to. So once you have ticked off all of the items, so they all have a status of complete, you'll see in here you've got if I just collapse the sidebar for a sec, sorry, you've got required checks completed is ticked. So you'll only get a tick in there if all of the required items have been ticked off and completed. If you are putting expiry dates in next to certain items, you'll see that the earliest expiry date will be sitting in the compliant till field. So as I've only got one, it's put that in there, but it will always show the earliest expiry date in that section. So when you're working with Tom, you might then go, actually, you're speaking to him, new candidate in, and you think, actually, he'd be really good for that role at M&E. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and shortlist him to that job. Of course, once you've spoken to him and checked he's free and that he's up for that role. So I'm going to shortlist him to the job, put in the job title, click on the tab key on my keyboard, click on that, and it will then attach him to that job. So 3 checks done. So if I go back to the profile page, we can see in the communication history, in the journal, candidate shortlisted to that job. So if we click on that, it takes us back into the job. And you'd always sit on the front page, but just to show you, in the candidate activity page, that's where Tom's going to be shortlisted, and that's where you've got all your options here to continue working him through the process. Now, what you then need to be doing as a consultant is going in, and you might know this already, but going down to the compliance and onboarding page, you might go, okay, so I know that Tom's got the standard agency checks that we do, but this particular client actually also need a site safety and a forklift license check. So you'll need to go back to Tom and add those items on and get those checks completed. If you don't, this is what's going to happen. So we go to candidate activity, I tick next to Tom and work him through, then you'll see it puts a stop in place. But what's interesting and important for you to understand is, when is that stop going to be put into place? So there are 2 options in the system linked to this part of putting someone through a job. One is called pre-hire and one is called new hire. So you can put 2 different stages of stop in place. So the first one, pre-hire, means you can shortlist Tom or a candidate to that job, as you can see, absolutely fine. But you cannot do any other action in here until you have gone and completed all of the items next to that candidate and tick them off that job has got on there. So it will look at the job's compliance, it will look at the candidates in the shortlist, it will look at their compliance, see if it matches the job, and if it doesn't, it will not let you do anything else. So if I show you, if we do send CV, it will say candidates, well, this candidate does not have a required item or have completed items or expired items, so he cannot be submitted to this job. And I'm like, straight away, you'll know that there's something not correct about the compliance. So if you've forgotten to go and check the compliance on the candidate and the job to see if they match, you'll go, right, okay, that's what I need to do. So see how it won't let you continue. Now, the other place you can put a stop, what you can do with new hire is you can let it stop you at booking. So what you will be able to do is you'll be able to send CVs, you can then arrange an interview, you can even make an offer at new hire. But what it does is when you go to book, it puts in a stop or a check at booking stage. So it very much depends on how sensitive the item is and when you want that check to be put in. So I know, I can see already mine's at pre-hire. So I'm like, right, I'm going to go and need to check the compliance. So if we go back to Tom, go back to his compliance page, we know we need to go and add in the additional items in, so we can just assign items as normal. The 2 we need to put in are the site safety and the forklift license. And then you'd go and make sure you speak to him, get those items received. If he hasn't got them, he'll need to go and get them. So you won't be able to continue until those are updated. Now, one thing I failed to mention earlier that's very key is the hire requirement stage. So can you see here, these are all required items. So when building an item in the system, you do have a choice to say whether it's a preferred item or required. Only an item that is a required item will put a stop in place when that check is done against the job. If the item is preferred, so it's not needed to continue working, then it won't stop you. But as you can see, mine are clearly all required. So as you can now see, I've gone and completed all my items in here. The forklift driver one has got an earlier expiry date than my one against the right to work. So as you can see, the earlier date is now in the compliant until field. So now when I go back to my job, and tick next to Tom and go to send CV, it will let me run that workflow as normal because it's checked it and gone, yep, everything's okay. It's fine to continue. So that's the main thing I wanted to show you. I just wanted you to understand the way you should be working. So you should be looking at the candidate, looking at the job. Do you want to put the compliance against that client record or the jobs, removing and adding items to the specific role? So it's very important to understand when the stop's been put in place and how you deal with that. So last thing I wanted to mention, I'm not going to run through this on the system, but there is a third stop that can be put in place. And this one is actually really important when it comes to your temp jobs and your contract roles as well. So the third stop that can be put in place, or checkpoint, that we call it, the hiring requirement. So that is going to be called rehire. This is very, very common for you guys that work with temp or contract roles, is that a candidate will be extended or asked to be work longer. So when you run the extension button in contracts or additional days in temp, you can put in a stop as well, or a check, should I say, that you've got in a rehire check. So it's going to look, and when you extend it for another week or month or whatever it is, year, it will then look at the expiry dates of those items within that period, the new end date, do another check, and it will then look if they're going to expire within that period and if they're still compliant as such. So it's important when you're creating items and adding them to the system, do you want them to do a check at what stage? Is it pre-hire or new hire? And then do you also want an additional step and check to be done at rehire, which again is really key for you guys in the system. So running through that should put it all together for you. So now you're going to have a very idea how the system knows when to do checks, how does it work, and how do you manage those